At Christmas dinner, I expressed my thanks to my aunt for the keychain she had mailed me for my birthday 2 months ago. My aunt paused stirring the sauce and said, "I purchased you a $400,000 apartment, the keychain was just a freebie." My whole family, who had been smiling, went pale as paper. I thought it was just a simple keychain, a sweet birthday gift from my favorite aunt. But that one tiny thank you at Christmas dinner blew up my entire family, revealing a $400,000 secret and a betrayal so cold, it still chills me to the bone. What would you do if your family stole your entire future? Picture this, Christmas dinner. The scent of my stepmother Linda's honey-glazed hem filling the air, candles flickering, her best china gleaming. My dad's meticulously carving the turkey, my 19-year-old half-sister Emma is glued to her phone supposedly banned at dinner, of course. And Linda, well, she's orchestrating it all like a general commanding an army. And then there's me, Lydia, sitting in the same spot I'd occupied for 15 years, ever since my dad remarried. Right next to my little Aunt Margaret, who flew in all the way from Phoenix as a surprise. I was genuinely happy to see her. Aunt Margaret is the only person in this family who ever made me feel like I actually belonged. So, I reached across the table, squeezed her hand, and said, "Aunt Margaret, thank you so much for the keychain you sent for my birthday. It's beautiful. I carry it everywhere. I even pulled it from my purse, a simple silver chain with a small heart charm. Nothing fancy, but coming from her, it meant everything." And that's when the room went absolutely silent. Not the comfortable quiet of people enjoying good food, no. This was the kind of silence that makes your stomach drop, the kind that screams, something is very wrong. Aunt Margaret's fork hovered halfway to her mouth, her eyes narrowing as she scanned the table. Dad froze mid-slice. Linda's smile plastered on her face like it was painted there. "Keychain?" Aunt Margaret's voice was dangerously calm. She set her fork down with deliberate precision. "Lydia, sweetheart, what keychain?" That's when I knew. The way Emma suddenly sat bolt upright. The way Linda's hand trembled reaching for her wine glass. The way Dad cleared his throat, like he was about to deliver bad news. But to understand why that moment felt like a bomb going off, you need to know what my family is really like. And trust me, it's no Norman Rockwell painting. Growing up as the stepdaughter in that house was like being a permanent guest who'd overstayed her welcome. My mom died when I was 7, and Dad remarried Linda 2 years later. Linda brought her own special brand of subtle cruelty, always disguised as concern for my well-being. When Emma got designer clothes for school shopping, I got carefully selected items from the clearance rack. "We want to teach Lydia the value of money," Linda would explain to relatives, as if frugality was a character-building exercise meant only for me. When Emma wanted a car for her 16th birthday, she got a brand new Honda Civic with a giant bow on top. When I turned 16, Linda suggested I could borrow her old minivan when it wasn't needed for family errands, which turned out to be approximately never. The pattern was always the same, Emma's needs came first. Emma's wants were necessities. My requests were luxuries they couldn't afford. College? That's where the inequality became impossible to ignore. I worked at a movie theater all through my senior year, wrote dozens of scholarship essays, and chose my state school specifically because I could afford the in-state tuition. Emma, on the other hand, applied to 5 private colleges with application fees that cost more than I made in a week. But here's the thing that really twisted the knife: they acted like this was normal. Like treating their daughters completely differently was just the natural order of things. When relatives commented, Linda would just smile sweetly and say, "Each girl has different needs. Lydia is so independent and responsible. Emma needs more guidance." Translation? Lydia can figure it out herself. Emma deserves to be taken care of. The only person who ever called them out on it was Aunt Margaret. She was the one who sent me graduation gifts, remembered my birthday every single year, and asked about my life like it actually mattered. She never had children of her own, but she treated me like I was precious. After growing up in that house, that felt revolutionary. When I graduated college with my nursing degree, magna cum laude, and debt-free, thanks to scholarships and working through school, my family's celebration was dinner at Applebee's. When Emma graduated high school with a C+ average, they threw a party that cost more than my car. By the time I moved out, I'd learned not to expect much. Christmas gifts were practical items, holidays were events I attended but didn't belong to. Family vacations were planned around my schedule, not something they invited me to join. That's why Aunt Margaret was so important. She was the only person who made me feel like family. By 25, I'd built a life that looked nothing like theirs. I was a single mom, working as a pediatric nurse, living in a small apartment with my 4-year-old son, Danny. His father had disappeared the moment he found out about the pregnancy. Honestly, that was pretty much what I expected by then. Our apartment was tiny, but clean. Hand-me-down furniture, toys from garage sales. Danny didn't care that his high chair came from Goodwill, or that his bedroom was just a corner of the living room with a curtain. He was happy, healthy, and loved. That's all that mattered to me. My family's relationship with Danny was complicated. They claimed to love him, of course. Linda would post pictures of him on Facebook, captions gushing about being the world's best grandma. But when it came to actual help, like babysitting so I could pick up extra shifts, they were mysteriously always busy. Emma, now in college at a school that cost more per year than I made, would occasionally drop by for an hour before complaining about how exhausting children were. Dad visited monthly, bringing small toys, staying just long enough to feel like he'd done his grandparent duty. The one person who showed up consistently was Aunt Margaret. Every few weeks, she'd drive 2 hours from her house to spend the weekend with us. Homemade cookies, new books for Danny, genuine interest in our lives. She'd babysit without being asked, help with household projects, and treat both Danny and me like we truly mattered. When Danny got sick with pneumonia at 3 years old, requiring a week-long hospital stay, Margaret took time off work. She slept in that uncomfortable hospital chair, brought me changes of clothes, and held Danny when I needed to shower or eat. My own father visited twice that entire week, both times for less than an hour. That's when I realized who my real family was. It wasn't the people who shared my last name or the house I grew up in. It was the person who showed up when things got hard. Last year, when Aunt Margaret called to tell me she'd been diagnosed with breast cancer, I didn't hesitate. "What do you need?" I asked immediately. "When are your appointments? Who's driving you to treatments?" The answer, predictably, was nobody. Dad was too busy with work. Linda had a prior commitment with Emma's college activities. Emma was, of course, too young to handle such serious matters. So, I became Margaret's transportation, her advocate, her support system. Twice a week for 6 months. I loaded Danny into his car seat after my shift, drove 2 hours to Margaret's house, then another hour to the cancer center. 3 hours for treatment, an hour back to her house, and 2 hours home. Danny learned to entertain himself quietly in hospital waiting rooms, coloring in books Margaret bought him. During the worst of the chemotherapy, I'd stay overnight, making sure she ate, took her medications, and didn't fall. Danny would curl up next to her on the couch, his small hand gently patting her bald head. "Aunt Maggie is brave," he'd whisper to me. "Yes, she is," I'd agree. And she deserved better from her family than what she was getting. The night Margaret finished her last round of chemo was one of the best nights of my life. We sat in her living room, Danny asleep between us, and she grabbed my hand, more strength than she'd had in months. "You saved my life," she said quietly. "Not just medically, though your nursing skills certainly helped. You showed up when everyone else had excuses. You made me feel loved when I felt forgotten." I squeezed her hand back. "Your family, real family. This is what people do for each other." Her eyes filled with tears. "Your father called me twice during the entire 6 months. Twice." Linda sent a card. Emma texted occasionally. She shook her head in disgust. But you, working full-time, raising a child alone, you found a way to be here every single time I needed you. The anger in her voice was new. Margaret had always been diplomatic, the peacekeeper. But cancer, it seemed, had burned away her patience for pretense. After Richard died, she continued, referring to her husband who'd passed 3 years earlier, I thought about changing my will. He left me well provided for, and we never had children. I'd always planned to leave everything to your father, assuming he'd take care of Emma and help you as needed. But this experience has shown me who actually deserves my consideration. I felt uncomfortable. Margaret, you don't need to. Yes, I do. Her voice was firm. You need to understand something, Lydia. I've been watching your family dynamic for years, making excuses, hoping things would improve. They haven't. If anything, they've gotten worse. She was right. Even during her cancer treatment, when you'd think family would rally, the patterns remained. Dad would call me for updates, not her. Linda would ask me to relay messages. They treated me like a communication service, rather than recognizing I was the one actually caring for her. When Margaret's hair started growing back, her energy returned, and she began making plans. I'm going to travel, she announced one afternoon. All those places Richard and I talked about visiting but never got to. I'm starting with Europe in the spring. 3 months of seeing everything I've always wanted to see. I was thrilled for her. She deserved every moment of joy. But I was also going to miss her terribly. Margaret was my anchor, the person who reminded me I was worthy of love. Before I go, she said, I want to do something special for your birthday. 28 is a big year. Starting your late 20s. I have plans. My birthday was in October, and Margaret left for her European adventure right after. She'd beaten cancer, and she was finally living the life she'd dreamed of. Her postcards arrived weekly, filled with stories of art galleries in Paris, beaches in Greece, pasta in Italy. She sounded happier than I'd ever heard her. 3 days before my birthday, a delivery truck pulled up to my apartment. I wasn't expecting anything, so I was confused when the driver handed me a clipboard. But there it was, my name, my address. A package from Margaret, with a European postmark. Inside was a small jewelry box containing a simple silver keychain with a heart charm and a note, Happy birthday, sweetheart. This is just a little something to hold you over until I get back and give you your real present. All my love, Aunt Margaret. It wasn't much, but knowing she thought of me while exploring ancient ruins made it perfect. I attached it to my keys immediately and carried it everywhere. Just as I'd told the family at Christmas dinner. What I didn't know then was that this small keychain was meant to be an afterthought. A placeholder for something much, much bigger. October 28th, my birthday, came and went quietly. I worked a double shift at the hospital because holiday pay helped with Danny's Christmas expenses. When I got home, exhausted but grateful, there was a voicemail from Dad, wishing me a happy birthday and apologizing for forgetting to call earlier. Linda had apparently reminded him. Emma sent a text with cake emojis. No card, no gift, no dinner invitation. Just an acknowledgement that yes, this was indeed the day I was born 28 years ago. It wasn't surprising, but it still stung a little. Danny, at 4, had made me a construction paper card with glittery handprints. His gift was worth more than anything they could have bought me anyway. I called Margaret that evening, using the international number she'd given me for emergencies. I got the keychain, I told her, fingering the silver heart. It's beautiful. Thank you for thinking of me on your trip. Oh, sweetheart. Her voice was filled with laughter and something else I couldn't identify. That little thing is nothing. Wait until you see what I really got you. It's going to change your life. I assumed she meant a nice piece of jewelry or something special from one of the countries she was visiting. Margaret was generous, but her gifts were usually thoughtful, not extravagant. A scarf from Ireland, a cookbook from Italy, that would have been more than enough. November passed quickly. Margaret's postcards kept arriving. In one, she mentioned she'd asked Dad to handle something important for her while she was away. Something about my birthday present. I thought that was odd. Margaret usually handled her own affairs, and she'd never involved my father in gift-giving before. But I assumed it was simple, maybe having flowers delivered or coordinating shipping for something too large to send internationally. December arrived with the usual pre-holiday chaos. My work schedule intensified. I was saving every penny for Dani's Christmas gifts. We'd started our Advent calendar tradition, reading Christmas stories, drinking hot chocolate, looking at lights. During this time, I noticed Emma posting pictures on social media from what looked like a new apartment. Beautiful living space, modern furniture, huge windows, expensive decor. When I mentioned it to Dad, he said Emma had gotten a great opportunity to house sit for someone traveling internationally. Lucky girl, I said, not thinking much of it. Emma always seemed to land in comfortable situations. Meanwhile, Dani and I were planning our own humble Christmas. Paper snowflakes. A small tree from the lot down the street. I'd saved enough for the Lego set he'd been wanting. It would be simple, but it would be filled with love. The invitation to Christmas dinner at Dad and Linda's came mid-December. The same generic phone call I got every year. "We're having dinner at 3, Linda informed me. Margaret is flying back as a surprise. She wanted to spend Christmas with family." My heart jumped. I hadn't seen Margaret since before her trip, and I'd missed her terribly. The thought of having her there made the whole event worthwhile. Maybe this year would be different. Maybe with Margaret there, I'd actually feel like part of the family instead of a courtesy invitation. I even spent extra money on a nice dress and a small gift for everyone. Dani was excited to see his great-aunt again. I had no idea that Margaret's surprise return was about to expose a betrayal that would shatter my understanding of my family forever. Christmas morning dawned cold and bright. Dani woke at 6, as children do, bouncing on my bed. We opened our modest pile of presents, and his joy over the Lego set made every extra shift worth it. Getting ready for dinner, I felt oddly hopeful. Margaret's postcards had been filled with stories of self-discovery. Maybe her new perspective would bring some positive energy. Maybe this Christmas would be the turning point I'd been hoping for my entire adult life. Dani looked adorable in his little button-down shirt. "Will Aunt Maggie have presents from far away?" he asked as we drove to the house. "I'm sure she'll have wonderful stories," I told him. "And maybe something special. But remember, spending time with her is the real gift." The house was decorated exactly as it had been every year, white lights, silver and gold ornaments, everything coordinated and perfect. "Lydia!" Dad hugged me warmly, and for a moment, I let myself believe this was genuine affection. "Dani, my boy, look how you've grown." Linda kissed me near both cheeks, careful not to disturb her makeup. "You look lovely," she said, in the tone she used when being politely civil. "Emma's been telling us about her new living arrangement. Such a wonderful opportunity." Emma beamed, launching into a detailed description of the apartment she was house-sitting. "It's in the best part of downtown. 2 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a gourmet kitchen. I feel like I'm living in a magazine." I made appropriate impressed noises while setting Dani up with his coloring books. Emma had always been lucky. "Speaking of apartments," Dad said, glancing at Linda. "How's your housing situation going, Lydia? Still renting that place near the hospital?" "It's working out fine," I replied carefully. I'd learned not to mention financial struggles. Any admission of difficulty would be met with suggestions for budgeting or lifestyle changes, as if my problems were simply poor planning rather than the reality of single motherhood on a nurse's salary. The doorbell rang at exactly 2:30. Linda rushed to answer it. Surprise, came a familiar voice, and there was Margaret, tanned and radiant, carrying a suitcase, wearing the brightest smile I'd seen on her face in years. "Aunt Maggie!" Danny launched himself at her legs, and she scooped him up with an enthusiasm that showed how much she'd missed us. "My darling boy, you've gotten so tall." She hugged me next, holding me tight. "And my sweet Lydia, I've missed you both so much." She looked incredible. The weight she'd lost during chemo had been replaced with muscle from all the walking she'd done. Her hair had grown back thicker, and her skin glowed with the confidence of someone who'd spent months doing exactly what she wanted. "How was your trip?" I asked, genuine joy filling my voice. "Your postcards made it sound like the adventure of a lifetime." "It was everything I dreamed it would be and more," she said, her eyes twinkling. "But I was ready to come home to the people I love most." Over the next hour, Margaret entertained us with stories. She'd hiked portions of the Camino de Santiago, taken cooking classes in Tuscany, spent weeks in museums. The whole family seemed more relaxed with her there, as if her presence reminded them how to actually enjoy each other's company. As we sat down to dinner, Margaret caught my eye across the table and winked. "I have something very special to tell everyone," she said. "But first, let's enjoy Linda's beautiful meal." The conversation flowed more naturally than it had in years. Even Emma seemed less focused on herself, genuinely interested in Margaret's adventures. I found myself relaxing, remembering what family dinners could feel like when they weren't full of underlying tension. That's when I made the comment that changed everything. Reaching across the table to squeeze Margaret's hand, I said with genuine warmth, "Aunt Margaret, thank you so much for the keychain you sent for my birthday. It's beautiful. I carry it everywhere." The silence that followed was not the comfortable quiet of a family enjoying time together. It was the silence that comes before an explosion, heavy with secrets about to be exposed. And Margaret's expression as she slowly sat back, her fork forgotten, told me that this Christmas dinner was about to become unforgettable for all the wrong reasons. The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity. Margaret's fork hovered over her plate, her eyes moving slowly from my face to Dad's, then to Linda's, then to Emma's. You know that moment in movies when the music stops and you hear every small sound amplified? The ticking of the grandfather clock, someone's nervous breathing, the soft clink of ice settling in water glasses. "Keychain," Margaret repeated slowly, like she was testing the word. "Lydia, sweetheart, what keychain are you talking about?" I pulled it from my purse, holding up the simple silver chain with the small heart charm. "This one? You sent it for my birthday with that sweet note about it being something to hold me over until you got back." Margaret stared at the keychain like it was a snake that might bite her. Then she looked around the table again, and I watched her face change. The warm, travel glow expression hardened into something I'd never seen before. Pure. Cold. Fury. "I didn't send you a keychain," she said quietly. "I bought you a $400,000 apartment." The words hit the table like a physical blow. Emma's phone clattered onto her plate. Linda's wineglass slipped from her fingers, red wine spreading across the white tablecloth like blood. Dad's face went through several colors before settling on. Gray. "And me?" I just sat there, blinking stupidly, because surely I misheard. Surely my 70-year-old aunt didn't just say she bought me an apartment worth more than I'd make in 10 years. Surely this was some kind of European humor I didn't understand. "I'm sorry, what?" I managed to say. Margaret's voice was deadly calm. "Before I left for Europe, I called your father. I told him I wanted to do something special for your birthday. Something big. You'd spent 6 months taking care of me during the worst period of my life. Driving 4 hours round trip twice a week. Staying overnight when I was too weak to be alone. Bringing Danny to chemo appointments because you couldn't afford a babysitter." She was looking directly at Dad now, and he was shrinking in his chair like a scolded child. I told him I'd found a beautiful apartment downtown. 2 bedrooms, perfect for you and Danny. Safe neighborhood, good schools, close to the hospital where you work. I put down the full purchase price and had the deed transferred to your name. My brain was struggling to process this. An apartment. A real apartment. With my name on the deed. But Emma said she was house-sitting. House-sitting. Margaret's laugh was bitter. Emma, sweetheart, whose apartment have you been living in for the past 2 months? Emma's face crumbled. She looked at Linda with pure panic, like a child who's been caught lying about breaking something valuable. Mom! You said you promised me. What exactly did she promise you? Margaret asked, and her voice could freeze fire. The floodgates opened. Emma started crying, but not the delicate tears of a wronged princess. These were ugly, panicked sobs of someone whose world was collapsing. Mom said you'd never find out. She said Aunt Margaret would be traveling for months, and by the time she got back, I'd be settled and you'd just have to accept it. I have to hand it to them. The logic was almost impressive in its audacity. Take a gift meant for me, give it to the golden child, and frame it as fairness because I already had somewhere to live. You know, my tiny 2-bedroom rental where Danny and I shared the living room because his bedroom was actually a converted closet. Dad finally found his voice, though it came out as more of a croak. Margaret, I can explain. Linda convinced me it would just be temporary until we could buy Emma her own place. I thought we'd have time to explain everything to you when you returned. Oh, please do, she said, leaning back in her chair. Explain to me how you took an apartment I bought for Lydia and decided Emma should live in it instead. Explain to me how you forged thank you cards in Lydia's name. My mouth fell open. They wrote thank you letters. Actually sat down and pretended to be me, expressing gratitude for a gift they stole. The sheer planning involved was breathtaking. We were going to tell her eventually. Linda jumped in, and I almost laughed at how predictable she was. When caught red-handed, Linda always had a timeline that made everything acceptable. We thought Emma needed the space for college, just for a few years. Lydia is so independent, she's been managing fine on her own. We were going to give her the apartment after Emma graduated. In 4 years? I said flatly. You were going to give me my own birthday present in 4 years? It's not like that, Dad said desperately. We just thought, practical considerations. Emma's education. And there it was. The same old song. Emma's needs come first. Emma's future matters more. Emma deserves the better option because she's Emma, the golden child who's never had to work for anything. Never had to sacrifice. Never had to choose between buying groceries and paying rent. I looked around the table at these people I'd called family for 24 years. Dad squirming in his seat, avoiding my eyes. Linda frantically calculating how to spin this into something acceptable. Emma still sobbing like she was the victim in this scenario. And you know what? For the first time in my adult life, I felt completely calm. Not hurt. Not angry. Just clear. Like someone just handed me glasses after years of trying to see through a dirty window. Margaret stood up slowly, her hands shaking with barely controlled fury. When she spoke, her voice trembled with emotion. So, all 3 of you knew this apartment belonged to Lydia and decided to steal it anyway. Is that what I'm understanding here? Dad looked genuinely stunned. Margaret, we never meant, I want the keys to that apartment right now. Margaret, please, let's discuss this rationally, Dad started. She laughed, and it was not a pleasant sound. You want to discuss rationality? Let's talk about how rational it was to steal from your own daughter. Let's talk about how rational it was to lie to me for 2 months. Let's talk about how rational it is for Emma to be living in an apartment that doesn't belong to her. Emma's face crumpled with genuine panic. We were supposed to have more time. You weren't supposed to thank her at dinner. Emma, Margaret's voice was ice cold. Your mother lied to you. That apartment was never meant for you. It was purchased specifically for Lydia, with her name on the deed, as a thank you for taking care of me when the rest of this family couldn't be bothered. The truth of that hit the table like a physical slap. While I was driving Margaret to chemo appointments, staying overnight when she was too weak, bringing Danny to waiting rooms because I couldn't afford babysitters. Where was everyone else? Dad was too busy. Linda was overwhelmed. Emma was too young. But taking credit for my gift? They had time for that. The keys, Margaret repeated. Now. Linda tried one more deflection. We spent money decorating it. Emma needed furniture, bedding, kitchen supplies. We've invested thousands. Money you spent on stolen property, Margaret cut her off. Would you like me to call the police and explain the situation? Because I have documentation of the purchase, the deed transfer, and copies of every forged letter you sent in Lydia's name. The threat of police involvement changed everything. Dad's face went pale, and even Emma stopped sniffling. Linda fumbled in her purse and produced a set of keys, placing them on the table like she was surrendering a weapon. Margaret scooped them up and turned to me. Lydia, would you like to see your apartment? Would I like to see my apartment? The apartment I didn't even know existed until 5 minutes ago? The apartment that's been mine for 2 months while I've been paying rent on a place where my 4-year-old son sleeps in a converted closet? Yes, I said quietly. Yes, I think I would. As I stood up to follow Margaret, Emma grabbed my arm. Lydia, please. You have to understand. I didn't know it was meant for you specifically. I thought it was just family property, and Mom and Dad decided I should use it for college. I looked down at her hand on my arm, then at her face. For a moment, I saw the little girl who used to follow me around. Before Linda taught her that we weren't really sisters, just two people who happened to live in the same house. Emma, I said gently. Did you really not know the apartment was specifically meant for me? Look, we all knew you'd never fight back. You never do. Mom said, you'd just accept it eventually, like you always do with everything else. The honesty was breathtaking. They hadn't just stolen from me. They'd calculated that I would be too passive to defend myself. I carefully removed her hand from my arm. But this time, you were wrong. Margaret was waiting by the door, her car keys already in hand. Are you ready, sweetheart? Danny had been remarkably quiet, coloring in his dinosaur book, occasionally looking up at the adults with the resigned expression of a child who'd learned that grown-up conversations often don't make sense. I gathered him up along with his books. We're going to see a new place, I told him as I buckled him into his car seat. Aunt Maggie has a surprise for us. As we pulled out of the driveway, I saw Linda and Emma standing in the doorway, watching us leave. Dad was nowhere to be seen. He was probably in his study, doing what he always does when family situations get uncomfortable, hiding until someone else fixes it. The drive downtown took 20 minutes, during which Margaret filled in the details I'd been missing. The apartment was in a converted historic building, original hardwood floors, huge windows. It was walking distance from Danny's daycare and a short commute to the hospital. The neighborhood had tree-lined streets, a small park, the kind of coffee shop where locals actually knew your name. I looked at dozens of places, Margaret said, but when I saw this one, I knew it was perfect for you. It felt like home. We pulled up in front of a beautiful brick building with black shutters and flower boxes. It was the kind of place I'd walked past before and imagined living in, but never seriously considered because it was so far out of my price range. 3rd floor, Margaret said, leading us to the entrance. Corner unit, with views of the park. The elevator was small and charming. Danny pressed the button for the 3rd floor and bounced with excitement. When the doors opened, Margaret led us to a door marked 3C and unlocked it with the key she took from Linda. The doors swung open, and I stepped into the most beautiful living space I'd ever seen. The apartment was stunning, not because it was ostentatiously fancy, but because it was perfect. Warm hardwood floors stretched through an open living area, windows flooding the space with natural light. The kitchen had white cabinets and gleaming granite countertops that looked like they'd never been used. Through the living room windows, I could see the park Margaret mentioned, with mature trees and a playground where children were playing even in the December cold. 2 bedrooms, Margaret said, leading us down a hallway. This one would be Danny's. Danny's potential bedroom was twice the size of our current living room. Built-in bookshelves, a large closet, windows facing east so he'd wake up to morning sunshine. He immediately ran to the window. "Mommy, look! Swings!" The master bedroom took my breath away. Spacious, but not overwhelming. Enough room for a real dresser, maybe even a reading chair. The closet was bigger than Danny's entire sleeping space back at our old apartment. But what really got me was the bathroom. A full bathroom with a deep tub, perfect for long soaks after difficult shifts. The previous tenant left some furniture, Margaret explained, as we walked back to the living area. Basic pieces that I thought you might want to keep. That's when I noticed that the apartment wasn't empty. There was a sectional sofa in soft gray fabric, a coffee table that looked like real wood, and a dining set that could actually seat 6 people. The kitchen was stocked with dishes, cookware, even small appliances. But these weren't basic pieces. These were expensive items, carefully chosen to complement the space. The kind of furniture I browsed in stores but never bought because it cost more than I made in a month. "Margaret," I said slowly. "This furniture is brand new." She smiled sheepishly. "I may have gone a little overboard with the move-in preparations. I wanted you to be able to walk in and feel at home immediately." I sank onto the sofa, and it was exactly as comfortable as it looked. Danny climbed up beside me, already claiming his spot. "Is this our new house, Mommy?" "I think it might be," I told him, though I was still struggling to believe this was real. My phone rang, jarring me back to reality. Dad's name appeared on the screen, and Margaret nodded at me to answer it. "Lydia, where are you?" His voice was tight with stress. "We need to talk about this situation." "What situation is that, Dad?" "You know what I mean. The apartment thing. We can work this out. Maybe Emma can stay there just until the end of the semester. Then we'll transition." I looked around the beautiful living room, at Danny already arranging his dinosaur figures on the coffee table. At Margaret watching me with encouraging eyes. "No." "What do you mean, no?" "I mean, no. Emma can't stay here until the end of the semester. No, there won't be a transition period. No, we can't work this out. This apartment belongs to me. It's been mine for 2 months while I've been paying rent somewhere else because you decided your daughter deserved my gift more than I did. Lydia, be reasonable. Emma has already moved in, started classes from that location. Her whole routine is built around living there." The audacity was breathtaking. They steal my apartment, let Emma settle in, build her life around it, then ask me to be reasonable about disrupting her routine. Where exactly did you think I was living, Dad? Did you assume I just vanished when you gave away my home? Silence on the other end. Emma can move out this week, I continued. She can take her personal belongings, but everything else stays. The furniture, the kitchen supplies, the linens. Everything you bought with the money you should have spent elsewhere stays in my apartment. You can't just kick her out with nowhere to go. Watch me. I hung up and turned off my phone. Margaret was beaming with pride. I haven't heard you sound that strong in years. She was right. I sounded different, even to myself. Calmer, but firmer. Like I'd finally found my backbone after 31 years of searching for it. What happens now? Now you move in this weekend, she said. If you want, I'll help you pack your old place. She paused. And Lydia, they're going to keep calling. Keep making demands. Keep trying to guilt you into backing down. Don't let them. I won't, I said. And I actually believed myself. Danny had discovered the refrigerator, which was fully stocked with groceries. Mommy, there's ice cream in here. Of course, there was. Margaret planned everything, down to stocking the freezer with a 4-year-old's favorite treats. As Danny chattered about the ice cream, my phone started buzzing with text messages. Linda, Emma, even my father's business partner, who'd never contacted me directly before. I didn't read them. Instead, I walked to the large living room windows and looked out at the park where children were playing, at the tree-lined streets where people were walking dogs and carrying coffee cups. At the neighborhood where my son and I were going to build a real life for the first time in years. I was exactly where I belonged. Moving in took exactly 1 weekend. Turns out, when you don't own much furniture, relocation is surprisingly simple. Our old apartment looked even smaller and more depressing when viewed through the lens of where we were going. The contrast was almost comical, like comparing a closet to a palace. Danny adapted with the resilience small children possess, treating the move like an adventure. He'd run from room to room, claiming spaces and announcing his plans. This is where my dinosaurs will live, he declared about the built-in shelves. This is where I'll eat my cereal, he announced about the breakfast bar. Margaret helped with everything from packing boxes to setting up utilities in my name. She thought of details I wouldn't have considered, registering Danny for the school district, finding a pediatrician, even locating the nearest grocery store and dry cleaner. You don't have to do all this, I told her as she organized kitchen cabinets with military precision. Yes, I do, she replied firmly. Your family stole 2 months of your life in this place. I'm trying to make up for lost time. The calls from Dad, Linda, and Emma continued relentlessly. Voice messages that progressed from apologetic to demanding to downright hostile. I'd listened to the first few, but they all followed the same pattern: acknowledgement that mistakes were made, followed by explanations of why Emma's needs should still take priority, ending with accusations that I was being selfish and unreasonable. I stopped listening after the 5th one. On Wednesday evening, a week after we'd moved in, Dad showed up at my door. No call ahead, no text. Just appeared in my hallway like he had a right to be there. We need to talk, he said when I opened the door. No, we don't. I started to close the door, but he put his hand against it. Lydia, please. 5 minutes. Against my better judgment, I let him in. Danny was already in his pajamas, watching cartoons on the television that came with the apartment, a flat screen larger than our entire kitchen in the old place. Nice place, Dad said, looking around with the expression of someone trying to calculate square footage and monthly costs. Really nice. But here's the thing, sweetheart. Emma is struggling. And there it was. The same old playbook. When logical arguments failed, appeal to my emotional guilt about Emma's well-being. I'd heard this song before. Struggling how? I asked, genuinely curious about what crisis they'd manufactured this time. She's living in a dorm room the size of a shoebox, sharing a bathroom with 20 other girls. The cafeteria food is making her sick. She can't concentrate on her studies because the conditions are so awful. I blinked at him. You mean she's living like a normal college student? That's not. It's not the same thing. Why isn't it the same thing, Dad? He fumbled for an answer that wouldn't sound completely hypocritical. She's not used to those conditions. She's never had to live that way before. And whose fault is that? The question came out sharper than I intended, but I wasn't sorry. Who made the decision that Emma should never have to experience discomfort or inconvenience? Who created a 20-year-old woman who falls apart when faced with standard college living conditions? We just want what's best for her. What about what's best for me? The words hung in the air. When exactly did you want what was best for me, Dad? When I was 16 and needed a car to get to my job? When I was working double shifts to pay for college while Emma got her tuition handed to her? When I was a single mother struggling to pay rent while taking care of your sister during cancer treatments? Where exactly was your concern for what was best for me then? Those situations were different. You've always been more independent, more capable. Emma needs more support. And there it was. The fundamental truth of my family dynamic, spoken out loud for the first time. Emma needed support because she was delicate and precious. I didn't need support because I was strong and capable. Emma deserved help because she struggled with normal life challenges. I deserved to struggle alone because I could handle it. This twisted logic had shaped my entire life. Every time I'd succeeded despite lack of support, it proved I didn't need help. Every time Emma failed despite massive advantages, it proved she needed more assistance. Dad, I said quietly. I need you to leave now. Lydia, come on. Can't we work something out? Maybe Emma could just use the second bedroom when she needs to study, or stay here on weekends when the dorm is too loud. Get out. Don't be unreasonable. Get out. The volume of my own voice surprised me. Danny looked up from his cartoons, eyes wide. I rarely raised my voice, and never at family members. Dad stared at me like I'd slapped him. I don't know what's happened to you, but this isn't the daughter I raised. You're absolutely right, I said, walking to the door and opening it. The daughter you raised would have handed over the keys to Emma by now. She would have moved back into a studio apartment and apologized for causing trouble. She would have spent the next 4 years paying rent while Emma lived in the home that was supposed to be hers. He stood there for a moment, looking like he wanted to argue further. But something in my expression must have convinced him I was serious. This isn't over, he said as he stepped into the hallway. Yes, Dad, I replied calmly. It is. I closed the door and engaged both locks. Through the peephole, I watched him stand there for several minutes, probably debating whether to knock again. Eventually, he gave up and walked away. Danny looked up from his cartoons. Was Grandpa angry? Grandpa was confused, I told him honestly. Sometimes grown-ups get confused when things don't go the way they expected. Are we in trouble? I sat down beside him on our beautiful sectional sofa, in our light-filled apartment, in the neighborhood where we belonged. No, baby. We're not in trouble. We're exactly where we're supposed to be. The legal transfer of the apartment took place on a Tuesday morning in Margaret's lawyer's office. I'd never owned property before, and the experience of signing documents that made me the official owner of something worth $400,000 felt surreal. Margaret had insisted on making everything legally bulletproof, ensuring that no one could ever again question my right to live there. Congratulations, the lawyer said, handing me a thick folder. You're officially a property owner. Property owner. At 31, after years of renting cramped apartments and worrying about lease renewals, I owned a home. Not just any home, but a beautiful one, in a neighborhood where children played safely in parks and neighbors knew each other's names. The financial relief was immediate and overwhelming. Without rent payments, my nursing salary stretched to cover not just necessities, but small luxuries I'd never been able to afford. Danny's daycare costs became manageable instead of crushing. I could buy groceries without calculating every item. For the first time in years, I wasn't living paycheck to paycheck. Emma's adjustment to college dormitory life was, according to my sources, not going smoothly. My cousin Sarah, who worked at the university, reported that Emma had been to the housing office multiple times requesting room transfers. She complained about noise levels, bathroom cleanliness, and roommate conflicts. The girl who'd lived in luxury her entire life was discovering what most college students considered normal living conditions. According to Sarah, Emma had also approached the financial aid office asking about additional housing allowances. When told that her family's income level made her ineligible for need-based assistance, Emma had apparently broken down, crying to the housing counselor. I was supposed to have my own apartment, she'd sobbed. This isn't how it was supposed to work out. The irony wasn't lost on me. For 20 years, Emma had been shielded from any discomfort or inconvenience. Now, faced with the reality of shared bathrooms and cafeteria food, she was genuinely shocked that money couldn't immediately solve her problems. Meanwhile, my text messages had become increasingly hostile. Emma's friends had apparently convinced her that I was being unreasonable and selfish. Her messages ranged from pleading, "I just need somewhere quiet to study for finals," to accusatory, "You're ruining my college experience because you're jealous," to downright nasty, "Everyone thinks you're a terrible sister." I screenshotted the worst ones and saved them in a folder labeled evidence, without responding to any of them. Margaret had warned me that Emma would escalate before she accepted the new reality. The escalation came on a Thursday evening when Emma showed up at my apartment building, crying dramatically in the lobby until Mrs. Parker from the first floor let her in. She knocked on my door with a kind of persistent, demanding rhythm that suggested she wouldn't give up easily. "Lydia, I know you're in there. We need to talk." I opened the door, but didn't invite her in. Emma looked terrible. Not the carefully styled perfection she usually maintained, but genuinely disheveled. Her hair was unwashed, her clothes wrinkled, and she had dark circles under her eyes. "You have to help me," she said immediately. "I can't live like this anymore. The dorm is horrible. My roommate snores. The bathrooms are disgusting. And I can't concentrate on anything. My grades are suffering." "I'm sorry you're having a difficult time," I said. "Honestly, college dormitories can be challenging to adjust to. You don't understand. I never signed up for this. When I chose this university, I thought I'd be living in the downtown apartment. I planned my whole college experience around having my own space, my own kitchen, my own bathroom. And there it was." Emma genuinely believed she'd been promised something that was never hers to begin with. In her mind, the apartment had always been intended for her use, and my claiming it was somehow theft. "Emma," I said gently, "that apartment was never promised to you. It was my birthday gift from Aunt Margaret. You were living there illegally." "It wasn't illegal. Mom and Dad said I could live there." "Mom and Dad don't own that apartment. They never owned that apartment. They had no right to offer it to you." Her face crumpled into fresh tears. "But what am I supposed to do now? I can't live in the dorms for 4 more years. I'll go crazy." "You'll adapt," I said simply. "Millions of students live in dormitories. Most of them survive the experience just fine. Most of them weren't raised like I was." The honesty of that statement was startling. Emma was acknowledging, perhaps for the first time, that she'd been raised with privileges that most people don't have, that she'd been sheltered from normal inconveniences and challenges that other young adults face regularly. "You're right," I agreed. Most students weren't raised to believe they deserve luxury housing as a basic right. Most students work part-time jobs to help pay for college. Most students share bathrooms and eat cafeteria food and study in libraries because their living spaces are too small or too noisy. "Are you saying I should get a job?" The question came out with such genuine confusion that I almost laughed. Here was a 20-year-old college student asking if she should get a job like it was a completely foreign concept. "Emma, how do you think I paid for college?" "That's different. You always worked." "I was focused on my studies." "What's your GPA?" I asked. She looked uncomfortable. It's not about grades. It's about the full college experience. Social development. Networking opportunities. In other words, she'd been coasting academically while living in an apartment she didn't deserve, funded by money that should have gone elsewhere. The full college experience she was worried about losing was actually the life she'd stolen from me. "I'm not going to help you, Emma," I said, finally. "You have housing. You have meal plans. You have everything you need to succeed in college if you choose to apply yourself. What about what Dad said about working something out where I could stay here sometimes? Dad doesn't make decisions about my home. Fine, she snapped, the tears drying up as anger took over. Keep your precious apartment. But don't expect me to forgive you for this. Don't expect me to ever speak to you again after college. I said honestly. I don't expect anything from you anymore, Emma. And that's actually quite liberating. I closed the door gently but firmly, leaving her standing in the hallway. Through the peephole, I watched her pound on the door a few more times before giving up and leaving. Later that evening, Dad called. His voice was tighter and more frustrated than I'd ever heard it. Emma came home crying tonight. She says you were cruel to her. I was honest with her. She's just a kid, Lydia. She's struggling with a major life change. She's 20 years old, Dad. When I was 20, I was working full-time while going to school full-time and raising Danny on my own. Emma is struggling with having to live like a normal college student for the first time in her life. We've decided she needs to get a part-time job, he said grudgingly, to help build character and responsibility. I nearly dropped the phone. After 20 years of protecting Emma from any kind of work or responsibility, they were finally going to make her get a job because she could no longer live in stolen luxury. That sounds like a good decision, I said carefully. But she shouldn't have to work while living in substandard conditions. If she could just use the apartment on weekends, Dad, stop. What? Stop trying to negotiate. Stop trying to find compromises. Stop acting like Emma's comfort is more important than basic honesty and fairness. The apartment is mine. It will always be mine. Emma will never live here. Not even on weekends. Not even during finals. Not even in emergency situations. You're being unreasonable. I'm being clear. There is a difference. The silence stretched long enough that I wondered if he'd hung up. Finally, he sighed deeply. I don't know what's happened to our family. What happened? I said quietly. Is that someone finally pointed out that we've never actually been a family? We've been a hierarchy, with Emma at the top, you and Linda in the middle, and me at the bottom. The only difference now is that I'm not participating anymore. I hung up before he could respond. Months later, I'm sitting in the breakfast nook of my apartment, drinking coffee and watching Danny build elaborate Lego cities on the dining room table that actually has enough space for his projects. Morning sunlight streams through windows that face east, just as Margaret promised. And I can hear children playing in the park across the street. My life has settled into a rhythm I never thought possible. Work doesn't feel crushing when I'm not constantly worried about money. Danny thrives in his new school, where teachers know his name and parents invite him to birthday parties. Our evenings are peaceful instead of stressful, filled with homework at the kitchen table and bedtime stories in his beautiful bedroom. The financial transformation has been remarkable. Without rent payments, I've been able to build a savings account for the first time in my adult life. I bought Danny new clothes that actually fit instead of hand-me-downs. I can afford to take him to movies and museums without calculating whether we'll have enough money for groceries afterward. But the emotional transformation has been even more profound. I'm calmer, more confident, more present. When colleagues at the hospital comment on how different I seem, I tell them I finally learned the difference between being independent and being abandoned. The family situation has reached a predictable equilibrium. Emma did eventually get a part-time job at a coffee shop near campus. Though, according to my cousin Sarah, she complains constantly about having to work weekends and deal with difficult customers. Her grades improved slightly once she was forced to develop actual study habits, but she still maintains that her college experience has been ruined by having to live like a normal student. Dad and Linda have apparently told extended family members that I'm going through a difficult phase and that they're giving me space to work through my issues. The narrative allows them to maintain their image as reasonable parents dealing with an unreasonable daughter. I don't bother correcting anyone's assumptions anymore. Margaret and I have grown even closer, bonded by the shared experience of my family's betrayal. She splits her time between traveling and spoiling Danny, who now calls her his adventure grandma because she brings him treasures from every trip. Last month, she took us both to Disney World for a long weekend, Danny's first real vacation. The text messages from Emma eventually stopped, probably because I never responded to any of them. Dad still calls occasionally, usually when there's some family event he thinks I should attend for Danny's sake. I decline politely but firmly. Danny has plenty of family in Margaret, plenty of friends at school, and plenty of love at home. He doesn't need exposure to people who view his mother as disposable. The most surprising development has been my relationship with my extended family. Cousins and aunts who had always seemed distant have reached out after hearing Margaret's version of events. Apparently, my immediate family's treatment of me had been obvious to outsiders for years, but no one felt comfortable commenting directly. "We always wondered why you seemed so careful around them," my cousin Rachel told me during a recent phone call, "like you were afraid of taking up too much space or asking for too much attention." Because that's exactly what I was doing. I'd spent 31 years trying to prove I deserved to exist in my own family, moderating my needs, minimizing my presence, making myself small enough to fit into the leftover spaces of their attention. Not anymore. This morning's mail brought a wedding invitation from a college friend. And for the first time in years, I can afford to buy a nice gift and travel to celebrate with her. Tonight, Danny and I are going to the Children's Theater downtown, something we've never been able to afford before. This weekend, we're hosting Margaret for dinner in our beautiful dining room, using the good dishes that came with the apartment. These aren't dramatic victories or life-changing moments. They're just normal experiences of a stable, comfortable life. But after years of struggle and uncertainty, normal feels revolutionary. My phone buzzes with a text from an unknown number. And for a moment, my old anxiety kicks in. But it's not Emma or Dad or Linda with another demand or guilt trip. It's a colleague from work, asking if I want to join a group of nurses going out for dinner next week. Yes, I text back immediately. I'd love to join you. I can afford dinner out with friends now. I have reliable babysitting because Mrs. Parker downstairs adores Danny and enjoys earning extra money watching him occasionally. I have the emotional energy for social relationships because I'm not constantly managing family drama or financial stress. Looking back, I realized that what happened at Christmas dinner wasn't really about the apartment. Though the apartment changed everything. It was about finally seeing my family clearly, without the fog of obligation and hope that had clouded my vision for decades. They didn't stop loving me. They never started. But Margaret did. Danny does. My real friends do. And most importantly, I finally learned to love myself enough to demand better treatment. The apartment was a gift. But the life I've built here, that's something I earned. As I finish my coffee and get ready for another day at a job I enjoy, in a home I love, with a child who feels secure and happy, I think about that moment at the Christmas table when the truth exploded like a bomb in the middle of Linda's perfect dinner. The best part wasn't watching their faces when they realized they'd been caught. The best part was watching my own reflection in the dining room mirror and seeing a woman who finally knew exactly what she was worth. So, what do you think? If you were in my shoes, at that Christmas dinner, what would you have done when that $400,000 truth bomb dropped? Have you ever had a moment where you finally saw your family, or a situation, with crystal clear eyes? Let me know in the comments below. I'm really curious to hear your stories and thoughts.